Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm here with fantastic Sophie Elinor. Sophie, how are you doing?
I'm good, Flynn. How are you?
I'm good. Good. We had a great time the last time that you were here. Doing some, what was it, belly jeans that we did?
Belly jeans, jelly beans.
Last time we were on, which was super fun. We've got some more fun in store for everybody here. And I'm very excited to hang out with you. Before we started streaming, we were talking about how cold we are. So we're both kind of in like a, you can't tell from the green screen, but we're both in kind of like a
Well, you're in space, so you must be freezing.
That's true. Yeah. And yeah, space, no one can hear you complain. And yeah, anyway. Get cold. But hey, everybody, it's great to see you here. We've got Johanna, Steve Festus is in there, Kira Ora, Steve, Barry Spencer is in there. Great to see you, Barry, jumping in on, I think you jumped in on the last Sophie once. Great to see you. But yeah, we're going to be hanging out. This is part of a series that we're doing. So we're going to be here on Thursday as well. And of course, as the title indicates, it's animated GIFs. It's GIFs, right? It's not GIFs, Soph?
I feel really weird saying GIFs.
You're right.
GIFs makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, I don't care if that's the actual pronunciation or whatever. Come on, it's GIFs.
It's GIFs, cool. All right.
GIFs.
Now that's sort of, I was about to cut the stream if you answered that incorrectly. So yeah.
I wouldn't blame you, you know? Like, respect. Yes, passed.
So yeah, this kind of fun and more. We're here for an hour. If you're watching on YouTube or anywhere else, jump on over to Behance chat, log in and say hello, like some of the wonderful people that we see there now. So this is a bit of a like kind of combined stream we've been working on for a while. There's something that we haven't done for a long time on Adobe Live that I think is really valuable, which is following a live brief. So often we're kind of giving ourselves projects to fill out our portfolio or learn something new, which is awesome and great. But following a brief is something that we don't go through all of the time. And so I've written a brief. Criticism is welcome. For Sophie, we've been chatting about this offline and we've kind of crafted this brief together that is a real brief. So it's a live brief. And Sophie, being very brave, has agreed to come and do parts of this brief for us on Adobe Live, which is what we're going to start with today. Right?
Yeah.
We're going to do this.
We're going to do it. Let's do it.
So
we're not really sure what we're doing exactly, but we're going to have a crack.
Exactly. It's a bit more loose. We know where we're planning on ending up because someone wrote like a very clever brief. But yeah, this is what we're doing. So I've brought up the brief. Sophie, you can follow along on your version if you like. And we're just going to kind of chat through this. So I've created this brief very professionally using Notion and just shared the link with Sophie. I don't know if you guys use Notion. I use it all the time. It's like totally changed my way I work. But I love that you can just share this stuff. So this is an animated GIF brief for Adobe Live. For Adobe. So actually we're going to be creating these animated, well, Sophie's going to do all the work and I'm going to do all the talking. Sophie's going to create these animated GIFs for us that we'll use within like email communication. So that's the main goal. So when we do Adobe Live, there's some people within Adobe Live will promote it occasionally out to people that might be interested in it. So for example, graphic design, they might share it out with people that might be interested in graphic design or people that are kind of, do graphic design work, illustration, photography, and motion. So those are kind of the main 4 categories that we really send stuff out. And yeah, we want to make it a little bit more exciting. I'll share with you an example of the brief at the bottom and you can kind of get the idea. And so jump in at any point if you want, but I thought I'd give you a bit of a break and I will talk through the brief first.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Because you'll be doing all the chitty-chatting
let's have a read through
a little bit later. And if you guys have questions about briefs, please feel free to throw them in. So we've got a project overview, just a kind of nutshell. What do we really want to do? We're making GIFs. We've found out that we need 2 different output formats. So we got a desktop version and a mobile version. Super important in emails, as you want the load time to be really low because of how like different email things like handle things. And obviously if people are on mobile data, you need it to be a bit smaller. Got a bit of a goal. So they're not just GIFs. We want to create fun and colorful animations to make emails more engaging. There's a bit of my corporate speak gets buried in here. I apologize for that. Engaging is very corporate.
Make it pop. Synergy.
It pop. Yeah.
Horsepower. Cab chassis.
Just jazz it up a little bit. I use them sparingly, but yeah, they do sneak their way in there. Convey the theme of Adobe Live each session by a category. I've thrown a little optional thing in there as well. Whilst the GIFs are primarily intended to be used in emails, it'd be cool if we could use them in other spaces. So, it could be used in some, like we could throw them on Giphy perhaps, and then like add them to our, promotional posts that we do to tell people when we're going live and stuff like that. It's always kind of good to think about that. Like is there a longer term application that might come in handy. It's also really good to communicate that to a designer and vice versa. Like, am I creating these and you can use them just for that? Or is this something that I'm giving to you and you can use wherever you want? It's important to have that sort of stuff in the brief. Hey, Jessica in chat. Yep, Sophie is back. So down to deliverables. People call it different things. I like to call them deliverables, which is just what is actually being handed over. And so that's also really important because often you'll get to the end of the brief and someone will say, hey, I want a logo, and you create and design a logo and you give them one file. Like, oh no, but I need it as a favicon and I need to be able to print it and I need this and it needs to work on different backgrounds and my client only use Word. Can you put it on? And that's a lot of work. So you want to be really clear up front, whether you're the designer or the client. Create a single animated GIF for each category. So the 4 categories I mentioned before. And it would be great in this case we've asked for like a project file as well. So that's for us if, the color palette changes or for whatever reason we might want to get in there and make a like small change. We have the ability to do so. Jana's asking for music. There is some music. Let me know if you guys can hear that. There we go. Target market is super broad for this one, but it's important to put it in because it's always a question that should come up. Basically just people that are interested in each category. We want the GIFs to be legible and include the category name that we mentioned before. And here's a bit of a tricky one. We actually need the final GIFs to be under or close to 1 megabyte. And that's really important because if they're too big, some email clients might not load them in time. Or might not load them at all. But when you're creating animations, you want the GIF size, you want the file size to be as big as possible. So that's a bit of a challenge and, might help dictate different directions that Sophie's able to go, right? Because the more...
I think, yeah, it definitely will. And straight away, like that's the first thing that I read where I'm like, okay, well, that's going to define quite a few parameters. Right. In terms of, well, we're not going to be going wild with gradients. We're not going to be doing like super like render heavy type animations. If it has to be under 1 megabyte, then we're going to have to like strip it right back.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first thing where I'm like, okay, yep. If that's a really important thing, which it absolutely is in email, because nothing worse than an email that won't load. People are just going to throw it in the bin straight away. So yeah, that's a really good thing. Like that stood out to me when I was reading through it.
Yeah, and it's certainly something that like I wasn't aware of at the very beginning when I was kind of thinking about this. So this is a bit of a discovery kind of process for both of us, kind of going, okay, this is actually going to be important. It's like, whoa, okay. Let's make sure we have that. We also have a color palette and kind of design considerations. Again, they're pretty broad for this. So, but a lot of what we do is kind of stemmed up. These are Japanese colors, but the video intro that we had here, the background that I have here, these kind of colors are the colors that we use for a lot of the assets that we create and like the scenes and things like that. You'll see the borders like on the side of us are kind of pulled from some of these background colors. So just somewhere to start and a bit of a consideration. We have a font that we use called Adobe Clean, but it doesn't have to be that one. And then we've included some examples of some things that Sophie's created before that we think are really awesome.
Can I just say, as like receiving a brief that has your own work as reference material, flattery will get you everywhere. Yeah. Like, we really like your work. Thank you so much.
Learned this before from my good friend Jeremy Lord, when we've talked about this sort of stuff, and it's like, well, why are you approaching me? Like, because often people will include, hey, this is the sort of thing we want, and it's like, my work's not kind of like that, and they're like, oh, but we like this one. So cool to include. Well,
that's actually a really interesting point too, because I feel like, and this is maybe getting into more of an existential conversation here, but if you as a graphic designer are receiving like a mood board or something that has almost entirely the work of someone else, you're like, why didn't you just go to that person?
Why don't you go to them?
Wait, like it's like a bit of a like moral gray ground, I feel like, where it's like, are you asking me to copy someone else's work, or you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
If it was entirely populated by one specific person, then I think, there's a bit of a question around that. So I appreciate you putting my own work in there.
Absolutely. And like, this is totally stuff that would work. So kind of more collage-y kind of thing. That could totally work. Like, I think about photography, and it's like, cool, there could be like a camera in there, like things that, you know, photographers might relate to. And then there's kind of the more typographic approach as well, which is all this kind of fun sort of stuff that Sophie does. And something I really discovered as well, like in the process of thinking about the brief, is like, it needs to be kind of legible the entire time. And I think that's important for an animation, like a GIF as well. Like if it was blank and then loaded, then I think people could potentially miss it. So it's probably important for it to be legible the entire time, which is why I kind of included that in there. And that's what a lot of this stuff says. So I'll kind of skip over that. We do have some external examples, not in terms of necessary style, but how it might look. So this is a, was it Winx, Sophie? Wix example that, you know, it's cool. It works, and you can see how it's being created with either a transparent background here or a background that matches the background color. And so you get this kind of big shape. This has this big relationship. And then as they're creating a different email or something, they could just change this text within. So it makes it really versatile and that kind of thing. And that's works really well. Here's a very similar example from Grammarly, very subtle kind of animation, where essentially it's just an animated kind of dropped in because it has the same background. It looks like it has a cool relationship. Doesn't have like a box around it or anything like that. So it looks nice and professional, nice and clean. And then finally,
and those are really handy examples to have a look at too, because even though you haven't necessarily written in the text, you know, it has to be centered and it has to be, you know, there can't be obvious borders. Seeing those examples is really, it's like straight away I'm like, well, that's what you mean by those. Like, that's really clear. Having a look at those examples, that's how it's going to be used in context. So that's something I need to think about when I'm designing it.
Nice. Awesome. Look at that. Happy accidents. And this is a bit hard to see, you guys, but you get a bit of an idea. This is what we currently have. You may have seen one. So it's just a JPEG in the back, and then text over the top. And so we think we could do a little bit better than that, and which is why we think there could be a really good spot for like something a little bit more engaging for everybody when we're kind of saying, hey, check out this cool stuff on Adobe Live, than a static kind of JPEG. And that's the brief, you guys. That's what we're starting with. Thoughts? What am I missing? Here's a quick question. I'll answer the question. Maybe we'll give chat the opportunity to let us know what's missing from a brief. What do you guys think is missing? I'd love to hear it. It's probably going to be like 50 answers. No, there's two very obvious things missing from that brief, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, Sophie, so reading through
this feels like a spot the difference for the chat.
It's not a trick either. It's not a trick. I'm not gonna trick anybody or anything like that. But yeah, there are things missing from this brief that you would really want, and I'd love to talk about that and see if we can share like what we think might be missing. But yeah, seeing this brief, tackling this, like where are your thoughts at? Where would you start with something like this? What do you think?
Yeah, so we have had a few chats offline prior to this, just so I could kind of wrap my head around what exactly we're doing. And like straight away, I'm like, well, let's make it typographic. Like, absolutely, let's make it typographic. That's what I love doing. That's, I think, probably the most appropriate in this context as well, because we're going to be using them as headings. So typographic is absolutely kind of the realm we're going to be playing in this week. In terms of, I think, like, the style of lettering is something I've actually been mulling over for a few days now, where I'm like, you said in the brief that it doesn't necessarily have to be the Adobe Clean typeface, which is the sort of branding font that's used in all those emails.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking around, I've been trawling through Adobe Fonts, going through all the libraries, found some really beautiful typefaces, but everything that I'm landing on, I'm like, it's not quite Adobe. It's not quite
right.
Or it's something that's like stylistically just perhaps the wrong mood. If we jump into, I've kind of started creating like a bit of a very loose sort of mood board here for this project.
Cool. That's interesting. So you've kind of grabbed a lot of the things that are in that.
Yeah,
like in the client's version of the brief, and this is for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
this is the first thing I do whenever I get any briefs. I'm like, I'm just going to dump everything in one place, and then I can kind of move things around and see what's starting to make sense, if there's any kind of common threads throughout it.
Cool.
And
sorry, just before we go on, I'm just going to give Steve 2 gold stars, because that's exactly the 2 things that we're missing. There is no deadline in that. Very important. And there is no budget in that. 2 very, very, very important things that you would need in every single budget. So you got them both straight away. 2 gold stars to Steve. Our deadline will be after the stream, because we don't know how long we're going to go. There's not like a strict deadline at the moment. And then budget is something that we're not going to share on the stream. That's basically all it is. But there
just
is a
quietly,
budget.
Flynn and I are negotiating that I will own 51% of Adobe.
That's right.
As of completion of this project.
I've spoken to the people up top. They're all totally fine with it. Couple of gifts.
It's a fair trade, really.
Yeah, I totally have authority to do that sort of thing. Yeah.
So I've just kind of dumped. So this is the reference email that you gave me, with some other little assets that you've included in there, and that's that sort of planet visual that you kind of have a version of in your background there. I think this sort of guy looks similar to what you've got going on there.
Yeah.
And then you had said that in the kind of intro video to all your Adobe Lives is kind of where you're pulling some of your color palette and sort of motifs from for the other collateral that you're making.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of went through that and grabbed a few screenshots of some artworks that I thought were really cool or really colorful, or had something that I could, kind of grab from it. Then what I've done is I've literally just eyedropped a little mini color palette direct from here. But I did notice that when I did that, I'm like, well, these kind of look a bit more muted than what I've got down here. So I've had another crack here to just give it a bit of a boost. And so I'm pretty happy with this kind of color palette that I've got going on here. I feel like that ties in really nicely with the visuals that I'm seeing underneath.
Yeah, cool.
I feel like that's a good, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself here too. Like, color palette's not really something I need to think about till the end.
Right.
But it was just something that you had mentioned in the brief, and I'm like, I'm just gonna do this and see what it looks like. The next thing that I'm looking at is the words themselves. So we've got 4 different pieces of type that we're going to have to work on. So it's graphic design, illustration, motion, and photography. So this is what I was saying before. I've been kind of searching around looking for different typefaces. This right here is the Adobe Clean. So this is the same typeface that is used in your emails and in all the videos and all your other marketing collateral. The thing that I did notice is that it's obviously not a display typeface. Like, it's meant for text. Like, it's been designed to be used in body copy and text. And you can kind of, there's like, when you really zoom in, you can kind of see, like this little kick here on the A. If I zoom even closer, well, where are we? Oh boy.
Enhance.
So things like that, You'll notice
what does that tell you? Is it just a little quirk of the A, or like?
To me, like I would say that's a design choice that the type designer would have made to work better at small sizes.
Right.
Like perhaps if we I think if they had done a straight line, this stroke here would have appeared thicker than it needed to. And so to account for that, they've gone, well, we'll just kind of cut into it a little bit here. Yeah. And the same thing with the ends of the crossbar of the T, like they're not perfectly vertical. So again, I think that's something that they've done to work better at text sizes. So I was kind of looking at that and going, oh, maybe it's not the right thing for to be used as like display.
Yeah.
But like I said, everything else that I looked at, I'm like, it's either, you know, like I'm a big fan of this.
That's
Mr.
cool.
Eves.
Yeah, what's that?
It's Mr. Eves. So this is
Mr. Eves. Okay.
Mr. Eves. Look up the story of Mr. and Mrs. Eves, the typeface, if you want to know some like really interesting type design related gossip from, I don't know, 70 years ago or something. But Susanna Licco designed this, and it's from Emigre Fonts, which is like, you can just download this from Adobe Fonts. But I just love it because like, I just love that little kick on the R. I just think it's so elegant and lovely. Like it's just such a nice little, I'm just doing this. I'm not sure what this is, but I also kind of loved this one. This had like a really postery kind of, I don't know, like this is the same typeface, but just with different weights. And I've just kind of played around with it a little. But honestly, I keep coming back to Adobe Clean. And my rationale for that is, even though I just said I don't think it's meant to be designed as a display, I think we can make some adjustments to the outlines to make it a bit more that. But also I think, considering it's going to be used in partnership almost always with this typeface, I think it would be really nice if they kind of went together. You've either got to go, because we've got this like quite clean, modern sans serif, you've got to either contrast really hard against that if you're going to pair a font with it, which none of these really do. Maybe this one, even then.
So you need to, so when you're talking about that, like, so in contrast, you would really need to go quite clearly different. Is that the point? You don't want to be too close, because then
like I think if you're going to use Mr. Eves, exactly. It's too close.
Yeah.
And it's not different enough. So like you might as well have just used the original typeface.
Right.
But you know, if you're going to use like a really wild script or some kind of slab serif or something that's like obviously got a really different personality, then I think you could go down that route. But I kind of think, I just keep coming back to this and thinking, I feel like this is our best bet. And we're not just going to be keeping it like this. Like the other consideration I'm having in my mind is, well, we're going to be animating these. So even though it is going to be, you know, the same DNA, the same typeface, it's not going to look exactly the same, because we're going to be, you know, we're going to be adding some texture and some movement, and that's going to bring it alive a little bit, and that's going to lift it and probably give it that sort of display flavor. So that's where I'm at. What are you thinking? Like, are you happy having talked that through?
Definitely. That makes sense to me. I guess my question, just for the stream and to share with the stream, do you find that exploration that you did with some of those other fonts, like even though you ended up back at the original font, is really important to like, just make sure that you've checked? Does that work? Is there a relationship, and have some like thinking behind it, so that if like, is that something you would share with the client and say, look, we explored some other fonts, you know, this is something you put in? Or is that something you would kind of keep to yourself and it's just part of your process?
I think it depends who the client is.
Right.
I think probably in the first instance, I would just do what I thought was best. And then, you know, when it came to first or second round changes and they were like, oh, maybe try something else, then I would kind of say, well, I explored these options, and for these reasons, that's why the original design worked a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think if you're a very special client, Flynn, so I wouldn't do this for everyone. But I think if you give sort of too much information up front, it just gets a bit muddy and a bit like you just kind of lose it a little bit.
Right.
Whereas I think if you can just kind of show, hey, here's why I've done this.
Yeah. And
not necessarily, here's not why I didn't do all these other things.
Right. Yeah.
Then that's maybe a better way to frame it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So my question for you is if we are going to go with this is our Adobe Clean headings all over here. Obviously, we've got different lengths of words here. Like graphic design is going to be quite long. Motion is very short. We are working within this particular sort of canvas size. So my question is, did you want all of these titles to be the same size, or do you want them to be as big as they can be within the canvas?
Oh, okay. Design decisions. Let's do it straight away. I think as big as they can be within the canvas, because they won't be shown, you know, one after another, essentially. So
yeah. Well, that's actually something else that we talked about, because that was one of my questions as well. Is, are these going to be seen next to each other? Because that will kind of change how I approach the brief. Like if they're meant to be a really obvious family, then we're going to need to think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah. So no, they won't be. So it'll be like the primary reason for them is to be completely separate. It's like just telling people and showing people, hey, this is motion. That's, you know, there's interesting information here for you to check out. Actually, I have a question from chat if we can.
Yeah, sure.
Ask this one just on the brief stuff. Johanna's asking, so far, how is this brief different from ones you've received recently? Like, is there anything that stands out? Yeah, I guess so. How does this compare to like another brief that you might get? And remember, I'm fragile. No, I'm not.
You're a delicate flower.
I am.
I would say it's a really thorough brief. Like you're obviously experienced in giving briefs before, and you've probably received quite a few briefs that were like, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting here. Have you received like some not so crash hot briefs in your time? Like, you know what someone needs in a brief, right?
Yeah, I've been around long enough.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Yeah.
I would say that the brief you gave me is great. Like, there really wasn't too much in it that I wasn't able to glean just from having a read through and looking at the reference images. I was having this discussion with someone the other day, actually, that a lot of the time, I think people have real trouble articulating what exactly they want. Like, they might have an image in their mind, but they don't necessarily have like the visual language to explain exactly how they want it to look. But that's where having reference images is actually a really useful thing, because you know, like I was saying with those external examples you gave me, I was like, well, straight away I know what you mean by how these are laid out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cool. And would you often get like shared in an email, hey, here's the brief, or would you get like a PDF, like just WhatsApp message?
A lot of the time,
how's it work?
A lot of the time it's again, it depends who it is. If it's someone that doesn't necessarily work in you know, design or marketing, then it's going to be really different because they're not used to speaking in that language. And so then in those situations, there's a lot more back and forth of me saying, do you mean you want it to look corporate? Should it be friendly? Should it be, you know, what? And I'll try and use language that's a bit more accessible, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, like I won't say, do you want it to be vector, or you know, I'll try to like what's the vibe, what's the mood, more than what's the period of art that you want me to reference or something, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like some people, that's just not a thing. So why don't I start setting up a file? Because I reckon that we can maybe start diving into one of these. And while I'm doing that, maybe I can just kind of loosely go through some of the thoughts I had around how I might be able to animate each of these.
Cool.
So there's a few that I'm still a little hazy on, and maybe the chat can help us with this. Actually, maybe we can crowdsource this. That's never been a terrible idea in graphic design, right?
It's different.
Too many kicks has.
Our chat's great.
So with, I mean, the first one that I read where I was like, straight away I can picture that is motion, because that's kind of where I live a little bit. And I was like, well, each of these letters, I'm just going to make them dance in a different way. You know, like maybe one can rotate, maybe one can jiggle, maybe one can bounce up and down, you know. I feel like that's going to be a really straightforward, and I can see exactly in my mind how that's going to look. I'm pretty happy with that.
Right.
Photography, I was kind of trying to, in my brain, just figure out, well, what's photography all about? Because we don't want to be too kind of cliche about it, I suppose,
right.
if we can avoid it. You know, we want to do something that's maybe at least a little bit smart, or at least we'll tell ourselves that.
So that's challenge, right? Like between very clearly and quickly, like showing a broad audience, this is photography, using visual language, and being cliche. That's going to be a very difficult kind of thing to balance.
Yeah.
I'm okay with being a little bit cliche. I think it's okay. Totally leave it to your discretion, but I think you can probably lean a little bit towards, because it is a broader audience. It could be people that have a camera but don't call themselves photographers, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
Okay. So the thing, like, I was trying to think about, well, what are some things related to photography? Like the first thing that I thought was, which I think is maybe the most cliched, is like the shutter kind of opening and closing. That to me, like, is straight away, like, that's photography. I was also thinking that like light is a very important element of photography. Like that's, you know, light and shadows and that kind of thing. That's all really important in that sort of area. But the thing that I have landed on that I think will come together quite nicely is pulling focus. So I think in my mind, I'm picturing the letters maybe just being like just on the edge of blurry, and then we're imagining someone just sort of shifting the focus a little bit, and they just sharpen and they come into focus a little bit.
Cool.
And maybe doing like a bit of a cascade of that, so we can treat each letter separately, and that'll make it a bit more dynamic, perhaps.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Cool.
Illustration, I had a few ideas around that, but I'm still kind of toying with it. I was initially thinking it might be fun for each of the letter forms to kind of transform into a little mini character. I think I showed you, Flynn. So this is kind of an example of what I was thinking, which is a little bit of Photoshop animation.
Oh, so this was done in Photoshop. Just
this one's Photoshop. But I don't know. I had another idea that I thought might work, which is maybe rather than each of them turning into little characters, maybe we can allude to the different tools that are being used. So maybe the word itself could be a pencil sketch that then turns into, or like blends into, you know, maybe it's like done with a heavier marker. Yeah. And then actually the digital thing reminded me of So this little guy in here with his little anchor point and Bezier handle,
right?
Like maybe that could be its final form, is that it has like a few anchor points that appear, and we just adjust those.
That's very clever. I like that.
And I thought that might relate nicely. I mean,
totally.
in a very tiny way.
Yeah, because they'd be very little, but yeah. But that's nice. That's really cool. I like that a lot.
And then graphic design. I'm really still mulling that one over. I think I wrote a few. What did I have? Oh yeah, these were some other little reference images I dropped in here where I was mulling photography over. I was like, oh, maybe we could have a little light meter or something like that appear, but I don't know. I'm not sold on that. And then graphic design, I was like, is it a hierarchy of text thing? Is it grids, wireframes? Is it something in that realm? Maybe the typeface can change. Maybe we can even just like go through, because we do have a few weights in Adobe Clean. We've got a few different weights here. So, maybe it's cycling through that or something. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about that.
The graphic design, I think you had something there that was like, look at me hovering art directing. Check this out. I'm like, go back.
I was thinking, this is like the ultimate client standing over your shoulder watching you work.
I realized that about 15 minutes ago as well. Anyway, go back there. I'm sorry. I will really try not to do it.
No, you're fine.
Try to have my streaming hat on instead of my client hat on. But the cursor moving letters is, and I don't mean to push you in this direction at all, I promise. The cursor moving letters around is like quite a nice idea as well. Like, you can picture like it picking the letter up and then dropping it in, and then it, something like that. Certainly not pushing that direction, but it's nice that it's an interesting way.
I quite liked that idea too. I thought that might be a nice thing. And I think conceptually that probably ties in really nicely with the illustration one as well, because we're not necessarily seeing an illustrator or a photographer, or we're not seeing the person, we're seeing the work. Like, we're seeing how a graphic designer would work. We're seeing how, like, with the photography pulling focus, that's something a photographer would do, kind of thing. I don't know, maybe I'm being a little bit abstract or reading too much into my own narrative there, but
well, it's early days now. You don't really know what it's going to look like until a little bit later. Hey, I've got a comment from Steve in chat. So yeah, let us know what you think about those kind of ideas in chat. Steve says, I'm thinking watch the birdie bird on top of the T. You could add motion. The bird converts into a flash. But don't make the bird look like the Twitter bird. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think it's like watch the birdie in terms of like taking a photo for the photography one. But yeah.
Oh.
Let us know your thoughts, guys. Okay. This is early days, so throw them in chat as we're going along.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Now I've picked the longest word that we have here to start with, which is a little bit tricky. I'm wondering whether we want to perhaps like elongate these letters at all, stretch them to take up a bit more space.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll take
when
a
you're
copy.
Stretching them, you like literally like you're probably not stretching them out, right? Like, are you just making the leading, the kerning? Like,
so what I mean, like we could literally just do this, but this is typographic. This is typographic blasphemy.
You lose your license. Yeah, you get pulled over. Can't do that.
Go straight to jail kind of thing. The way I would do it is I would just grab our anchor points, and that way we're keeping our stroke relationship consistent, that kind of thing. But it is going to mean that this particular word is going to be really tall compared to the others, and we might be losing a little bit of our relationship between them. So
Right.
So maybe this height is a little bit extreme. Maybe that's a little bit more. That's got a bit more presence on the page.
Right.
Maybe. So you can commit typographic blasphemy and do what I just did, and then go back and clean up the mess that you made, which is perhaps maybe going to be a slightly faster
seems dangerous
approach.
that's like very like relying on your eye, right, to get that. You want to be pretty experienced. I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that with typography.
Well, do you know what? I actually think there's a lot more eyeballing in typography than people like to admit.
Right.
So much of it is making allowances for optics.
Right.
And so I kind of think that it's maybe not the worst way to go.
Interesting.
I kind of believe that well, that's not going to work actually, because when I do this, I need to do these separately, these anchor points. I kind of have the opposite belief, where when you treat type really mathematically, that's when it starts to look really weird and off, and when you forget that optics are involved.
Yeah. I see that every now and then, not so much these days, but Brand New, like Under Consideration, that website. Do you know this? Have you heard about this? It's like sponsored based. You probably would have seen projects linked to it, but often they'll Armin will basically do a post on like a new logo or a new branding for whatever it is. But it's the comment section that is always a blast, because it's a lot of people that tend to not have had access to the brief. They're just seeing the outside thing. They're like, well, I wouldn't have done that. It's a little bit like a YouTube comment for design, and it's it's quite fun to read, but it's like reading YouTube comments kind of thing. But often that will come up, so there'll be someone that will sort of mention, well, they'll get the file, they'll get the like logo, which often has lots of type in it, of course, that's been carefully crafted, and then kind of put a grid on it and just be like, oh, this O is way off, it's over the top, like the spacing here is actually a little bit different. And then you'll see like perhaps more experienced like designers getting in and say, yeah, that's optically right.
Yeah,
it's not technically right. And see this like kind of debate happen like pretty much every time a project was posted. You see the same conversation happening, like optical versus like technically correct. And it's like, you're going to see this in either really small or really big, and it needs to be different and all that stuff.
My favorites are when someone will create a logo and it's literally just like, I don't know, a teardrop shape or something. And then they'll show you the technical drawing and it'll be like 1,000 circles and like curves. And like, this is how we got to this like perfect shape. Like, it's just a teardrop shape, man. You didn't need to draw 3,000 circles to get to that point.
Got like the Illuminati triangle like in the background. Like
on that like perfect spiral thing.
The
love
Fibonacci.
That perfect spiral. Oh man, too much.
Yeah.
So I think we've cleaned our crime scene up pretty well here. I don't know. Have I missed any? Really? Are there any really super obvious? I do think that's like it's got a bit more presence on the page, so I'm happier. Like this is just a little bit. I don't know. There's just not enough going on there. So I'm feeling like this is a little bit better. The spacing, I think, is pretty nice and even.
Looks good to me. Do you blur your eyes? Do you ever do that?
That does actually sometimes help. Yeah. The thing that I'm looking for is the negative space. So I'm just kind of trying to loosely assess whether we've sort of got, there are tricky letters like this. There's a big gap in here, but if I move the A any closer to the R, we're going to have little touching feet, and we simply can't have that. We can move them a tiny bit closer. This needs to come out. Yeah, I feel like we're looking pretty good there. And I've also just split each of our letters onto different layers here.
Right. I saw you did that at the very beginning.
Just to make life a little bit easier when we get over to After Effects. Which, why don't we do that now? So I'm gonna get rid of that guy. So we've got our file set up. Again, the colors, like I've just chosen white to start with. We can change the colors at the end. Now that I've got my little color palette, that's going to be really quick and easy to do. Just for the purpose of kind of like blocking out our animation to begin with. I think we've kind of got enough here to work with. So
cool. Well, that's great. I'll just a quick update. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I didn't actually think we were going to get to After Effects today.
Oh, so my goodness.
So that's a bonus. It does go quick. So impressive that you made it all the way to After Effects today. But yeah, just to let you know, 10 minutes left. We had 2 suggestions in to mull over from chat before.
Okay.
Hannah said you could add some star-like flashes in the background to simulate a photo being taken. Oh,
I did think of that. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, I thought that would be, yes. I love that. Yes, we're going to do that for sure.
Nice.
Sorry, what was the second one? I cut you off with my excitement.
Another idea, adding a camera button above the text that is pressed when the type does a wave. So I'm guessing it's kind of like presses in a little bit and we get some flashes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Extra ideas?
Like it. Yeah, cool. Unreal. Okay, so the little pull focus trick that I wanted to apply to our photography text, if we just go into the effects and presets panel, I think the one we want is just camera lens blur, which is actually perfect given we're talking cameras, we're talking super photography. It's like After Effects heard us talking. We're just dragging and dropping it over the top, and you can kind of see straight away we've now got this lovely little blurring effect happening here. So this is being defined by our blur radius, which is right here. So if I crank that right up, we're gonna
wow.
blur into oblivion, basically, which is perhaps a little bit too much. Right. Oh no, are we just a blob the whole time?
No. Yeah.
Are you wearing lenses?
No. It's not I'm the opposite. They're very, very subtle, but yeah, I always wear glasses unless I'm at my computer, and because just at my computer all the time these days, I just kept collecting dust.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel ya. Yeah. So I think given that what you said earlier about we do still need the text to be legible at all times, even when we're at our most blurry, I think we kind of still want to be able to make out that it's a letter P. Like we don't want to lose it completely.
Yeah.
So I probably don't want to go any more than this. Even that is maybe a bit far, but we can adjust. Let's just drop a keyframe and have a little play and see what we can do. So I think if we are just kind of keyframing that to 0. So I think the thing that might sell this even more is if we add a bit of a scale transformation to it as well, so that not only is it sharpening, but it's also coming a bit closer, as in you're maybe zooming a little while you're pulling focus. So if we start maybe at 90 perhaps, and then when we get to here, then we're at 100. And I think the thing that I like to do with literally just about any type of animation is add a bit of overshoot, because I think that just feels more organic. It feels more real. So we might overshoot maybe if we go, what does 105 look like?
Oh, okay. So we're like going over the, overshoot.
I'm going to go over and then come back.
Yep.
I feel like that's anytime I am adjusting a camera, I always go too far and then have to pull back a little.
That's true. Yep.
So just kind of trying to emulate that a little bit.
Because you're trying to get the sweet spot, right? You kind of need to go a little bit further and go, no, that's too far, it's not far enough, and then kind of you get it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So to that end, we might actually, hang on, what did I just do? So we've got 100% here, and then we overshoot to like 105. So we probably want the focus to do the same thing. We probably want it to be blurry, sharpen, and then go blurry again to follow that kind of that arc that the scale is doing as well.
Right.
So if we started with the blur on 9. Maybe let's bring it back up to, I don't know, what does 3 look like? So we're just going far enough to be like, oh, no, we've gone too far. Let's bring it back a little. Mm. And if we switch, bring our scale this way. Okay. So that's happening too quickly, so we need to give these a little more breathing room. But that's we're kind of where we want to be, I feel like. So we're out of focus, we're sharpening, we're zooming a little. We kind of hit the sweet spot, but then we go a bit too far and we blur again. And then we know we got to come back a little.
Cool.
And this is without any ease on our keyframes too. So our movement is a little bit janky. Right. We want to smooth that out. So why don't we just do that now? So we'll highlight all our keyframes and add some easy ease. And that's now looking way better. We can go and adjust these if we want, but I feel like maybe the scale will adjust. Just bring that a little.
Is this the graph editor that you're using there?
Yeah. So that's just controlling the speed of our animation. So I feel like we're kind of sitting pretty with this one. Like, I feel like that's kind of giving the effect that I was going for with that. We're zooming in, we're kind of adjusting our tools until we get our shot just right. And then the thing that I'm going to do, we've got quite a few letters here, but we can try and make this a bit more economical and try and do a few things at once rather than layer by layer.
Right.
We should just be able to copy our camera lens blur, and I think, let's see if it'll let me paste them all at once. Hey. Look at that. Nice. Look at that. So we've now, gosh, don't you just, love when a plan comes together.
I was going to say, good. It's actually mandatory to go, hey, if everything works the way you're we only have a couple of minutes left. So we've literally only got about 2 minutes left before we're cut. So maybe we can pause at this point. We will be picking up.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to make sure that we don't get cut off. But yeah, we're going to pick up from here. In After Effects, so in 48 hours. So in here in Sydney, in Australia, it's going to be Thursday. It's Thursday lunchtime. So come and check it out. We'll pick up where we left off, and do some more animations and stuff.
Happy days.
Happy days.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how this one comes together. Hopefully well. It would be a bad look for me if this didn't work out.
It's okay. It's all live, so we'll watch you. Of course,
it's no pressure at all.
It's like a nerve-wracking like time to have like lots of people watching you do the process, which is this discovery phase. But I thank you very much for being very brave and letting us do that, because it's really valuable. It's really important.
A pleasure.
You know, it's the sort of thing that you don't get. You only ever see the final version of everything, but we want to see kind of what's under the hood, the mistakes we make along the way, and the experimentation. So very, very valuable. I hope you guys have got something out of it, and thanks for hanging out with us and the suggestions and everything like that. And we'll be back in 2 days for more Sophie.
Exciting.
I'll see you then.
All right. See you, Flynn. Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye.